Hello, this is Mrs. Taylor, and I want to kind of go over the first three problems from your homework. It is from the 4-6 Slope-Intercept form problem-solving worksheet. And at top, it gives you a description. It says the cost of food for an honor roll dinner is $300 plus $10 per student. The cost of the food as a function of the number of students is shown in the graph. Write the correct answer. So this is your graph. You're having a dinner for your honor roll students. Along the x-axis you have the number of students. That would be your independent because it's on the x-axis. Along the y-axis you have the cost. That would be your dependent. And number 1 says write an equation that represents the cost as a function of the number of students. And so you have two choices. You can use the graph to do that, or you can use the description. If I was using the description, I want to look for two things. I want to look for any numbers. So I see $300 here and then $10 here. And then I want to look for any kind of phrasing that helps me understand what those numbers represent. So if I look, it says $300 plus $10 per student. Well, plus is a math word. That means you add. So you would take the 300 and you would add it to $10 per student. The other thing to keep in mind is anytime you see the word per, that means it is a rate of change, which means slope. So your rate of change, your slope in this scenario is $10 per student. And so in the linear relationships, if I have slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, my rate of change, my slope is m. And so if it's 300 plus $10 per student, I could think of that as the 300 being the b value, your y-intercept, your initial amount, and the $10 being your m value, your slope, your rate of change. The other way to think about it is if it's 300 plus $10 per student, that would be 300 plus 10 times some mystery amount, which is the number of students. So we'd say let x represent the number of students. And then I need an equation, which means I need an equal sign. And since we're looking at a graph, we have x and we have y. Well, we used x to represent the number of students, if you look here. And so we're going to use y to represent cost. Now, if I had used the graph, I can see the y-intercept pretty clearly. It's 300. It's where the line touches the y-axis. That's my b value. And then I could choose that coordinate pair, which would be 0, 300. And I could choose another coordinate pair, which looks like this one here. So 20, and what would that be? 2,500. And I could find my slope by subtracting my y's over my x's. So that would be 500 minus 300 over 20 minus 0, which would be 200 over 20, which would equal 10. So either way, I'd get my slope as 10, my y-intercept is 300, and I would create my equation in that form. Now, it says in number 2, identify the slope. The slope we said was 10. Identify the y-intercept. The y-intercept we said was 300. And then it says describe their meanings. Well, this 10, if we look up here, $10 per student, that is the cost per student. So each student costs $10. And my y-intercept, well, if it's 300, that's where the number of students is 0. So if there are no students, you'd still have to pay $300. So the cost with 0 students. And then this last part, number 3, says find the cost of the food for 50 students. Well, if it's 50 students, that's the number of students. And remember, X represents the number of students. So I can use my equation. If I substitute X with 50 and evaluate, I will get the cost, which is Y. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do 300 plus 10 times 50. 10 times 50 is 500. 500 plus 300 is 800, which would be my Y value, and my answer. The cost for 50 students is $800. So that is how you would take this linear relationship. It's a constant rate of change of $10 per student. Represent it as an equation and use that equation to solve a problem.